Four Australian SAS soldiers lie motionless in thick jungle, their bodies pressed into shallow scrapes, barely deep enough to be called positions. A Viet Cong battalion passes within meters. The sound of boots crunching on wet earth fills the air, rhythmic and deliberate. Whispers cut through the humid atmosphere, Vietnamese syllables sharp and precise. The smell of mud and unwashed uniforms, of sweat and gun oil and damp canvas, fills their nostrils until breathing itself becomes an act of inhaling the enemy's presence. Creaking gear, the metallic clink of canteens against webbing, the rustle of equipment being adjusted. One Aussie's hand trembles slightly, the adrenaline coursing through his system making fine motor control nearly impossible. He watches his own fingers shake, sees the tremor, and slowly clenches his fist to steady it, squeezing until knuckles go white and the shaking stops. Around him, the jungle breathes with enemy presence. Footsteps pass so close he could reach out and touch a boot. Voices drift overhead. The entire world has compressed into this moment of absolute stillness, of being so close to death that movement itself becomes suicide. For 6 days, 4 Australian SAS soldiers shadowed a battalion that outnumbered them 100 to 1, lived in their shadow, breathed their air, counted their numbers, learned their patterns, and lived to choose the moment they would end it. The 1,960 seconds in Phuoc Thu Province, South Vietnam. A war being fought in the headlines, with search and destroy missions, with helicopter assaults and artillery barrages, with the mechanical thunder of American firepower. But in the jungle, in the Green Mountains, away from roads and bases, a different war unfolds. The Australian SAS employed tiny patrols for deep reconnaissance operations, 4-man teams that slipped into enemy territory for days at a time. Their job wasn't to fight. Fighting meant compromise, meant your position was known, meant the mission had failed before it succeeded. Their job was to see without being seen, to move like smoke through the canopy, to gather intelligence that would direct the larger war machine. They were the eyes that saw what satellites couldn't, the ears that heard whispers in the dark, the quiet professionals who made the invisible visible. But this mission, this particular operation deep in Viet Cong territory, would force their hand in ways none of them anticipated when they left base. Inside the command tent, maps spread across wooden tables marked with unit positions and suspected enemy movements. The canvas walls filter afternoon light into a green-tinted glow. Officers huddle over terrain features, fingers tracing elevation lines and stream beds. Reports have been coming in for 3 days now. Village informants, radio intercepts, aerial reconnaissance photographs showing disturbed vegetation and new trails. They all point to the same conclusion. A large Viet Cong force is moving south through the province, traveling under canopy where air assets can't track them effectively, moving in battalion strength or larger. The Australians need confirmation, need exact numbers, need to know composition, weapons, direction, intent. Vectoring, artillery, and infantry requires eyes on the ground, eyes that can get close enough to count numbers, identify weapons, track movement patterns without being detected. Eyes that can survive in enemy territory long enough to relay intelligence that matters. The commander gives the order, his voice quiet but absolute. 4 men, 6 days. Track them. Don't be seen. If you're compromised, extract immediately. If you can't extract, survive. Simple parameters for an extraordinarily complex mission. The 4-man patrol prepares in silence, each man moving through pre-combat rituals honed by training and experience. The patrol commander, a veteran of multiple tours, calm and analytical in the way that comes from seeing too much to panic about anything, possesses that rare bush instinct that separates good soldiers from exceptional ones. He can read terrain like other men read newspapers, understanding how valleys channel movement and ridgelines provide concealment, knowing instinctively where an enemy commander will position his forces. The lead scout, younger but gifted with an almost supernatural ability to read, sign, moves through the world seeing stories in disturbed earth and broken twigs, in the way grass bends and sap weeps from cuts. He tracks like his grandfather tracked in the outback, like generations of Australians learned to follow game through country that kills the careless. The signaler, the quiet backbone of the team, carries the weight of communicating life or death intelligence back to base, knowing that his radio is their lifeline and his encryption their security. He checks batteries twice, then 3 times, obsessive about the details that keep teams alive. The automatic rifleman, steady and patient, understands that controlled fire saves lives while panic kills everyone. He's the base of fire, the covering element, the man who makes withdrawal possible when things go wrong. They move with unspoken trust, deeper than any spoken order. Mateship forged not in words, but in shared danger, in knowing that each man's skill keeps the others alive, that weakness in one means death for all. They don't talk about it. Australians never talk about it, but it sits there between them, solid as the weapons they carry. They slip into the jungle at first light, moving in single file with 10 meters between each man, spreading out so one burst of fire can't take them all. The canopy swallows them within 50 meters of the tree line. Behind them, base camp continues its routine. Ahead, somewhere in the green infinity, an enemy battalion moves south. Day 1 begins with finding sign, with proof that intelligence reports match reality on the ground. The lead scout moves ahead, eyes scanning the jungle floor in that unfocused way that sees everything by seeing nothing specifically. Movement catches attention faster than fixed staring. He's looking for anomalies, for things that don't belong, for the human mark on wilderness. And there, 20 meters into primary jungle, he finds it. Footprints pressed into soft earth near a stream crossing. Not 1 or 2, dozens, maybe hundreds. The earth is churned, where a large group funneled through a natural gap between 2 fallen logs. He crouches, touches the ground, feels the moisture content in the soil, feels the way the print walls have started to crumble but haven't fully collapsed, sees a few ants beginning to explore the depression but not yet establishing trails. Fresh, maybe 6 hours old, maybe less. He traces the direction change where the column turned southeast, noting the scuff marks that indicate some confusion in the turn, suggesting the decision was made quickly rather than planned. Sap weeps from freshly cut vines where someone widened the trail for equipment. The cuts are clean, made with a sharp machete, not hacked with a dull blade. This isn't a ragged militia force. This is organized. Professional. The scout waves the patrol forward. The commander examines the sign himself, confirming the assessment. They have their starting point. Now begins the patient work of following a force that doesn't know it's being followed, that thinks itself safe in its own territory, that moves with the confidence of operating in familiar ground. The Australians mark the trail with subtle signs only they will recognize, tiny arrangements of sticks or stones that let them backtrack if needed without leaving obvious markers the enemy might spot. This isn't guesswork. This is reading the land, seeing what others miss. Australian bushcraft, generations deep, learned in the outback where water is scarce and shade is salvation. Perfected in these green mountains where water is everywhere and the enemy is invisible. It's a natural advantage, this understanding of how men move through wild country and what marks they leave behind. The scout can tell how many men by the depth of prints and the width of disturbed area, can estimate loads by drag marks and how vegetation is broken, can gauge morale by trail discipline, whether the column stays tight or spreads loose. Every detail tells a story to those trained to read it. They move slowly, covering perhaps 2 kilometers in 3 hours. Speed is irrelevant. Silence is everything. They stop frequently, listening, letting the jungle return to its normal rhythms around them. Birds resume calling. Insects return to their drone. When the jungle goes silent, when birds stop singing, that's when you freeze because something else is moving nearby. They communicate with hand signals, with subtle gestures that convey complex information without sound. The patrol commander points 2 fingers at his eyes, then forward. I see something ahead. The scout taps his ear, then raises a closed fist. I hear movement. Everyone stop. The signaler holds up 3 fingers, then points right. 3 people moving right to left. Entire language developed in silence. Understood instantly, precise as any radio call. Day 2. The heat presses down like a physical weight. Humidity so thick that breathing feels like drowning in slow motion. Sweat soaks through uniforms within the first hour of movement. It runs into eyes, stings, blurs vision. It pools in boots, turns socks into wet rags that rub skin raw. Insects swarm around exposed skin, drawn to carbon dioxide and body heat, landing on faces and necks and hands with that maddening persistence that makes men want to slap and swat, but you can't. Movement attracts attention. So, you let them bite. Feel the sting. Watch them feed. Let them fly away in their own time. Leeches find gaps in uniforms, those places where fabric meets skin, where trouser legs tuck into boots, where collar meets neck. They're small when they attach, barely noticeable. Hours later, you feel the wetness of blood running down your leg or arm, look down to see them engorged and fat. You can't pull them off. Not here, not now. They'll detach when full. Until then, they're passengers. Sleep becomes a luxury measured in minutes, not hours. The patrol moves mostly at night when darkness provides concealment, lying up during day to observe and rest. But rest doesn't mean sleep. Someone must always watch. Always listen. The human body can survive incredible sleep deprivation, can function on 20-minute intervals, grabbed when possible, on that twilight state between waking and unconsciousness, where you're aware but resting. But exhaustion is as deadly as enemy fire. Tired men make mistakes. Mistakes kill everyone. The patrol commander watches his men for signs of fatigue that crosses from manageable into dangerous. Watches for the glazed stare, the slowed reaction, the moment when a man is running on instinct alone. They're not there yet. But 6 days is a long time. The clock is always ticking. Voices drift through the canopy ahead. Faint at first, barely distinguishable from wind in leaves. Then clearer. Vietnamese. Multiple speakers. The patrol freezes mid-step, each man dropping into whatever cover is nearest. No hesitation, no checking with others. Just instant response to threat. They're closer than intended. Much closer. The voices continue. Casual conversation. Someone laughing. The smell of smoke drifts on the breeze. Cooking fires. The battalion is taking a break, stopping for a meal or consolidating before continuing movement. The Australians have closed the distance faster than planned because the enemy slowed unexpectedly, probably waiting for other elements to catch up, maybe letting scouts range ahead before committing the main body to unfamiliar terrain. The commander makes a decision. They need to see the enemy, need to count them, need to identify weapons and unit markings. That means getting closer, much closer. As darkness falls and the enemy settles into night routine, the Australians creep forward with agonizing patience. 5 meters. Wait. Listen. 5 more meters. Wait. Listen. They can hear individual conversations now. Can hear gear being stacked. Can hear the metallic sounds of weapons being cleaned and checked. They find positions perhaps 50 meters from the nearest enemy troops, certainly within hearing distance, probably within the perimeter of any professional force's security element. They scrape shallow depressions in the jungle floor, moving handfuls of dirt and leaves with infinite care, creating the barest suggestion of cover. And then they settle in. They must sleep within 50 meters of Viet Cong sentries, must lie silent and still while an enemy battalion camps around them, must trust that their fieldcraft is good enough, that their camouflage is complete enough, that their discipline is strong enough to survive the night without detection. This is the reality of deep reconnaissance. This is what four-man patrols mean. This is why not everyone can do this work. Day 3 arrives with gray pre-dawn light filtering through the canopy, full immersion in quiet fear that sits in the chest like a physical weight. The Australians lie in their shallow scrapes, barely depressions in the jungle floor, covered with leaves and debris that blend them into the background. Through the darkness that precedes dawn, sounds carry with startling clarity in the still air. They hear the enemy camp wake up, hear coughs as men clear sleep from their throats, hear the first morning conversations, voices still rough and quiet, hear gear being gathered, equipment checked, the routine sounds of soldiers preparing to move. Metal clacks against webbing, that distinctive sound of military hardware being handled. Boots squelch in mud as men walk to the latrine area. Whispered orders pass down the line as squad leaders rouse their men and prepare for movement. Smoke from cooking fires drifts through the trees, morning rice being prepared, tea being boiled. The smell of wood smoke and fish sauce and sweat and damp earth mixing into one thick scent that tells the story of an army in the field. The Australians don't move, can't move. One mistake kills all four. This truth sits heavy in their chests, in every breath, in every moment of absolute stillness. They've practiced this, have trained for it. But training in a friendly area with instructors watching is different from the real thing, from knowing that 30 meters away are men who will kill you instantly if they discover you. Men who have every reason to be alert because they know Australians operate in this province, because they've been warned about small patrols and ambushes, and the quiet-moving soldiers who appear from nowhere. A mosquito lands on the rifleman's nose. He cannot move, cannot swat, cannot react in any way. Movement means death. He lets it bite, feeling the sharp sting as the proboscis penetrates skin, watching cross-eyed as it feeds, seeing its abdomen swell with his blood. It feels like an eternity. 5 seconds? 10? Time loses meaning when you're watching an insect drink your blood while enemy soldiers walk past. The mosquito finally lifts away, satisfied, disappearing into the general swarm that makes the jungle a misery. The rifleman's nose itches intensely where it bit. He ignores it, adds it to the collection of other discomforts that make up existence right now. The signaler needs to breathe, but his chest position is awkward, body twisted to keep the radio protected while maintaining weapon orientation toward the most likely threat direction. Each breath moves his chest, which moves the leaves piled on his back, which might rustle loud enough to be noticed. So he exhales slowly through his nostrils, controlling each breath to avoid any movement that might disturb his camouflage. Inhale for 4 counts, slow and steady through the nose. Exhale for 6 counts, letting air escape gradually. It's a meditation in survival. His back aches from the twisted position. He ignores that too. A Viet Cong soldier steps over a fallen log, moving through the area the Australians are hiding in, probably checking the perimeter, or maybe just taking a shortcut. His boot comes down inches from the patrol commander's claymore pouch, so close the commander can see the frayed laces and worn sole, can see mud caked in the tread, and a small rip near the toe where fabric has started to separate from rubber. The Australian stares at that boot with absolute focus, willing himself invisible, becoming part of the ground, thinking about nothing except being a log or a rock or part of the earth itself, the boot lifts, moves on, takes another step, another. The soldier continues without pause, without looking down, without noticing that he just walked past 4 enemy soldiers hiding within arm's reach. The commander tracks him by sound, hearing the footsteps fade, hearing him call out something to another soldier, hearing them both laugh about something unknowable. The column passes. First, the security element. Then the main body. Hundreds of men flowing through the jungle in an organized movement that takes hours to complete. Then the rear guard, weapons oriented back along the trail, watching for pursuit. The Australians remain frozen for another hour after the last sounds fade, waiting to ensure no stragglers, no forgotten equipment being retrieved, no one doubling back. Only when the jungle has fully returned to its normal rhythm do they allow themselves to breathe normally, to slowly move cramped muscles, to begin the process of tracking again. Day 4. Something changes in the enemy's behavior. A shift, subtle but unmistakable, to soldiers who've been watching them for 3 days. The Viet Cong commander orders counter-tracking patrols, small teams that drop off the main column and circle back, watching their own trail for signs of pursuit. They haven't spotted the Australians specifically, but they sense something wrong, some instinct warning them of eyes in the jungle. Maybe a scout noticed broken vegetation that didn't match the pattern. Maybe someone saw a boot print that seemed out of place. Maybe it's just professional paranoia. The knowledge that Australians operate in this area and that small patrols are always possible. Whatever the reason, the battalion's security tightens noticeably. Rear guards appear more frequently, stopping to watch and listen before moving on. Flanking elements probe deeper into the tree line, moving parallel to the main force, checking areas that might hide observers. The entire force becomes more alert, more cautious, moving with the heightened awareness of soldiers who know they might be being watched. The Australian patrol must go even quieter, must reach levels of stealth that seem almost superhuman. They abandon some gear in a carefully hidden cache, leaving behind anything that might clink or rustle, anything non-essential to survival and mission completion. Extra ammunition stays behind. Spare rations stay behind. Anything in the packs that might shift or settle and make noise gets removed. They strip down to weapons, essential ammunition, radio, water, and first aid. Everything else is excess weight and noise liability. They move only when wind blows through the canopy, waiting sometimes for 20 minutes or more for a breeze strong enough to mask the sound of footsteps and rustling vegetation, then covering 10 or 15 meters before freezing again as the wind dies, using nature's noise to mask their own. Timing movement to the environment rather than to any human schedule. This is jungle craft at its finest. Discipline meeting respect for the enemy's skill. The patrol commander thinks about the VC commander out there, unknown but respected. Thinks about the decisions that commander is making, the security measures being implemented, the alertness being maintained. The Viet Cong are not amateurs. They're not the incompetent enemy that propaganda sometimes portrays. They've survived American sweeps and helicopter assaults, survived artillery barrages and search and destroy operations. They've learned to move at night, to disperse during day, to use terrain and weather and timing to avoid superior firepower. They know these mountains the way the Australians know the bush back home. They're professionals fighting a war they believe in, using tactics that work against a more heavily armed enemy. Underestimating them means dying, and the Australians know this in their bones. But the Australians know patience, and in this green cathedral of waiting, patience becomes a weapon as effective as any rifle. They can outlast discomfort, can endure hunger and thirst and fear and exhaustion without breaking, can maintain discipline when discipline is the only thing preventing detection. This is the Australian advantage, not technology or firepower, but the simple ability to suffer quietly while doing the job that needs doing. No complaints, no shortcuts. Just professional execution of an incredibly difficult mission. The day passes with agonizing slowness. They cover perhaps 500 meters. That's all. 500 meters in 10 hours of movement. But they're still undetected, still gathering intelligence, still closing with the enemy on their own terms. That's what matters. Day 5. The patrol commander studies the terrain ahead with the intensity of a man making life and death decisions. He's been thinking about this for 2 days now, running possibilities through his mind, weighing options, considering variables. The battalion is moving through increasingly channelized terrain, following a valley that runs between 2 ridge lines. The valley narrows ahead, funneling from perhaps 200 meters wide down to 70 or 80 meters at its tightest point. He sees what he needs. Sees the killing ground that's been waiting for him to find it. The funnel valley, where the battalion's route narrows between 2 ridges that rise 30 or 40 meters above the valley floor. Thick jungle on the slopes provides concealment for firing positions. Restricted movement for anyone in the valley itself, limited by terrain and vegetation to essentially a single axis of advance. Perfect claymore arcs, where mines can be positioned to sweep the entire width of the valley floor. Uphill firing position with clear lanes of fire and covered withdrawal routes up the ridgeline behind. Streams on both sides of the ridges providing navigation aids for extraction. This is it. This is where 6 days of tracking ends and 90 seconds of violence begins. This is the killing ground. Australian warfare stripped to its essence. Calm, analytical, measured. No bravado, no emotion clouding judgment. Just mathematics and geography combining into lethal advantage. The commander marks it mentally, memorizes landmarks, calculates distances and angles. He signals the patrol together for a brief conference. The first time they've been within arm's reach in hours. Whispered consultation. Agreement. They need to reach that position before the battalion does. Need to set the ambush and be ready before the enemy arrives. That means moving faster, taking calculated risks, accepting slightly higher chance of detection in exchange for achieving position. But they must do it without alerting the rear security elements now sweeping behind the main column, without leaving sign that might warn the VC commander that something is wrong ahead. They move with purpose now, covering ground faster than they have in days. Still careful, still quiet, but deliberately instead of glacially. They parallel the valley, moving along the ridgeline above, using elevation to avoid the enemy troops below. Twice they freeze as VC security patrols pass nearby. Small teams checking the high ground, doing exactly what the Australians would do in their position. But the Australians are better at this, have trained more, have that generation of bushcraft behind them. The VC patrols pass without noticing 4 men who've become part of the landscape, who've mastered the art of being invisible in plain sight. As afternoon fades toward evening, they reach the position. The commander's initial assessment holds up to close inspection. It's perfect, better than he hoped. They have perhaps 3 hours until darkness, 3 hours to prepare the ambush before they lose working light. 3 hours to create a trap that will channel an entire battalion into overlapping fields of fire. Day 6. Setting the ambush. This is where 6 days of tracking culminates in the precise, patient work that separates professional soldiers from everyone else. Each claymore must be positioned perfectly, angled for maximum effect, but hidden from casual observation. They place them along the valley floor in a careful pattern, overlapping fields of fire that ensure complete coverage of the kill zone. 7 claymores total, every one they carried in, plus the one they retrieved from the cache they left behind. The mines must be invisible from the trail but positioned where vegetation won't significantly impede the ball bearings. Too much cover and the foliage absorbs fragments. Too little and the mines are obvious. They camouflage each one carefully, using local vegetation and the existing ground pattern to make them disappear. They run det cord, the detonation cord that links the claymores in series, burying it under leaf litter and routing it away from obvious paths. They prepare the clackers, the firing devices, testing the circuits without connecting them, checking and rechecking every connection point, because this only works if everything fires simultaneously. They dig fire pits, shallow depressions on the upslope that will conceal muzzle flash during the ambush and provide some protection from return fire. Not much, maybe 30 centimeters deep and a meter long, but enough to make them harder targets. They position these carefully, ensuring each covers an assigned sector, creating interlocking fields of fire that leave no gaps in coverage. They clear firing lanes, removing small branches and vines that might deflect rounds, but doing it subtly so the changes aren't obvious to someone walking the trail. They mark aiming points, small visual references that let each man know exactly where his sector begins and ends. A distinctive tree for the left boundary, a large rock for the right, memorizing angles in the fading light, burning these references into memory, because in the chaos of contact, there's no time to think, only to execute. They check arcs of fire by lying in position and sighting along their weapons, ensuring no overlap where two men might shoot the same target while leaving another uncovered, ensuring no gaps where someone might slip through untouched. They position the automatic rifleman on the flank where he can enfilade the entire kill zone, where his sustained fire will anchor the ambush and prevent any organized enemy response. They establish withdrawal routes, marking them with subtle signs only they'll recognize in the chaos and smoke of combat. They choose rally points, places to link up, if separated, each successively further from the ambush site. They synchronize watches. They confirm radio procedures for calling in the contact and requesting extraction or fire support. They rehearse the ambush in whispers, walking through each phase without moving from positions. Detonation. Initial burst. Sustained fire. Cease fire. Withdraw. Rally. They do all of this with a battalion only kilometers away, close enough that they can hear faint sounds of the enemy camp, close enough that a cough or dropped piece of equipment might carry on the wrong breeze and alert security patrols. As darkness falls completely, they settle into their positions and wait. The enemy won't move at night, not through unfamiliar terrain in battalion strength. They'll camp somewhere nearby and resume movement at first light. The Australians eat cold rations, drinking water sparingly, urinating into empty canteens to avoid leaving their positions and creating smell or sound. They take turns on watch, 2 men alert while 2 rest, rotating every 2 hours to keep everyone functional. Sleep comes in fragments when it comes at all. That shallow doze, where you're never fully unconscious, where any sound brings instant awareness. The rifleman dreams of home, of beer cold enough to hurt your teeth, of his girl's laugh, of normal things that seem impossibly distant from this moment. The signaller checks the radio for the 10th time, confirming battery life, rehearsing call signs and frequencies. The scout lies motionless, every nerve attuned to the jungle, listening to the night sounds and cataloging them, knowing what's normal and what isn't. The commander doesn't sleep at all, running through possibilities, considering what could go wrong, planning contingencies for contingencies. They had watched the enemy for 6 days, counted them, learned their patterns, understood their strengths and vulnerabilities. Now the enemy was walking into a trap the Australians built, one quiet step at a time, one careful decision after another, 6 days of patience compressed into a killing ground 30 meters deep. Dawn comes with gray light and morning mist hanging in the valley. The jungle drips with condensation, water falling from leaves in a constant patter that sounds almost like rain. Birds begin their morning calls. Insects resume their drone. The world wakes up around 4 men who haven't moved in hours, who are so perfectly camouflaged that they could be logs or rocks or shadows. They hear the enemy battalion beginning to move, hear the sounds carrying through still morning air, voices, equipment, the organized chaos of a large unit getting ready for movement. The sounds grow louder, closer. The battalion enters the funnel. The approach happens in slow motion from the Australians' perspective, each second stretching out elastic and strange. First come the scouts, 2 men moving cautiously down the trail, weapons ready, eyes scanning the jungle to either side. They're good, these scouts, alert, professional. They pause frequently, listening, studying the terrain. One of them stops perhaps 20 meters from the first claymore, looking directly at it. And the rifleman's finger tightens on his trigger, ready to initiate early if the scout sees the mine. But the camouflage holds. The scout looks away, signals his partner. They continue forward, passing through the kill zone, and moving beyond it down the valley. Perfect. The scouts will be clear of the ambush, but too far ahead to respond effectively when it's triggered. Then comes the main body, and this is what the Australians have been waiting for. A river of olive uniforms flowing between the ridges, moving in a loose column formation. Men spaced for safety, but still dense enough that the column stretches back 100 meters or more. The mass of humanity fills the valley bottom, turning the empty jungle into a moving organism of soldiers and equipment. They carry AK-47 seconds, mostly, the distinctive curved magazines catching light. Some have RPGs, rocket-propelled grenades carried across backs. Others haul heavier weapons broken down into components, machine guns and mortars distributed among multiple carriers. Officers walk interspersed with the troops, distinguishable by slightly different uniforms and the way men defer to them. This is a reinforced battalion. Maybe 500 men, possibly more. The Australians are outnumbered more than 100 to 1. Then comes the weapons group, the heavy equipment that provides the battalion's serious firepower. Heavy machine guns broken down and carried by multiple soldiers. One with the receiver group, one with the barrel, one with the tripod, others with ammunition crates. These are the men who provide base of fire, who can pour sustained firepower into an enemy position. Taking them out is critical to the ambush's success. The Australians watch from their positions, hearts hammering so hard it seems impossible the enemy can't hear them. Adrenaline floods their systems, making fingers tingle, making time feel simultaneously too fast and too slow, making the world preternaturally clear, every detail sharp and vivid. The commander can see individual faces, can see that one soldier is older, probably in his 40s, probably a veteran of the French War. Can see another one is very young, maybe 16, probably recently recruited. Can see exhaustion in how they walk, the 1,000-yard stare of men who've been in the field too long. Mouths have gone dry, that combat dehydration that makes swallowing difficult. But absolute stillness, maintained. This is the moment. 6 days, compressed into the next 90 seconds. Everything they've done has been building toward this point. The commander's mind counts. Calculating. Watching the column flow into the kill zone. The leading elements are through and moving down valley. The main body is in the zone now, filling it, the density exactly what he needs. The weapons group is just entering, spread across 15 or 20 meters of trail. Too early, and they miss the bulk of the battalion. Too late, and the scouts might hear something wrong ahead, might react, and warn everyone else. Wait. His throat constricts with tension. He can hear his own heartbeat in his ears, a drumming that seems loud enough to give away his position. His finger rests on the clacker, the firing device for the claymore array. The timing has to be perfect. Not when the first men enter the zone. Not when the last men are still outside. Right now, when maximum density is in the zone, when the most enemy soldiers are concentrated in the smallest area. Now, he whistles. A bird call. The planned trigger signal. A sound that fits the jungle and shouldn't alarm anyone. To the patrol, it means everything. The scout tenses. The signaler grips his weapon. The rifleman acquires his first target through iron sights. The commander squeezes the clacker. Claymores detonate with thunderous violence that shatters the morning calm. 7 mines, 700 steel balls each, 4,900 projectiles launched simultaneously at 1,200 meters per second into massed troops occupying a confined space. The sound is beyond deafening, a physical pressure wave that slaps the Australians even from their protected positions. Trees shred as ball bearings rip through trunks and branches. The concussion wave ripples through humid air, visible as a distortion that races outward from each detonation point. Leaves and debris blast upward. Smoke and dust boil up from the valley floor. In the space between one heartbeat and the next, the peaceful morning jungle becomes hell. The Australians open fire before the smoke clears. They've trained for this, have practiced immediate action drills. Until they're automatic. Until there's no thought required. Only execution. Short, controlled bursts. 3 to 5 rounds, then shift to a new target. The automatic rifleman works his lane with patient, methodical precision. A 3-round burst here, another there, covering his designated sector with disciplined fire. He's not spraying bullets randomly. Each burst has a target, a specific enemy soldier who represents a threat. He fires, assesses the result, acquires a new target, fires again. The rhythm is almost mechanical, the product of hundreds of hours on the range. The patrol commander's voice cuts through the noise, calm despite everything happening, directing fire where it's needed most. His voice is the anchor point, the stable reference that keeps everyone oriented in chaos. He sees a group of enemy soldiers attempting to organize a response and directs fire toward them. He sees someone reaching for a radio and kills him before the message can be sent. He maintains awareness of the entire tactical picture while simultaneously engaging targets in his own sector. Lane discipline holds. No one crosses sectors. No one shoots at the same target while ignoring others. No wasted ammunition. Every round that leaves a barrel has a purpose. Precision over volume. This is what separates trained soldiers from untrained shooters. From the Viet Cong perspective, the world has just exploded without warning or reason. One moment walking down a valley trail, tired and thinking about the next rest halt. The next moment the earth erupts in violence. The deafening blast comes from everywhere and nowhere. Men fall without understanding what happened. The concussion alone stuns many who aren't hit by fragments, leaving them disoriented and deaf, unable to process what's happening. Confusion spreads like wildfire through the column. Where is the enemy? How many are there? From which direction is fire coming? The ambush was designed to answer none of these questions. The Australians are upslope, shooting downward from concealed and protected positions. Muzzle flashes are partially hidden by fire pit positioning and foliage. Smoke from the claymores obscures everything. Trees seem to erupt with violence, bullets cracking past or impacting with that distinct thwack of rounds hitting wood. The sound is everywhere. Rifles firing in disciplined bursts, creating an impression of more weapons than actually exist. Men dive for cover behind logs and into shallow depressions, seeking anything that might provide protection. Others attempt to return fire, but can't identify targets. They shoot at muzzle flashes, at shadows, at nothing, wasting ammunition without effect. Officers shout orders, trying to organize a response, trying to establish fire superiority, trying to maneuver elements to flank the ambush. But the ambush was designed for this moment, designed to prevent organized response through overwhelming initial violence and continued accurate fire from superior positions. The Viet Cong are experienced soldiers. They're not collapsing or panicking. They've been in combat before, have survived ambushes and airstrikes and artillery. They know what to do, theoretically. They attempt to flank, sending small teams up both ridgelines to locate the ambushers. They return fire as best they can, searching for targets. They try to pull wounded men to safety. Officers move through the chaos trying to impose order. These are brave men doing what soldiers do, fighting back against surprise attack despite being at terrible disadvantage. But the ambush was so carefully prepared, the position so perfectly chosen, the Australian fire so accurate and disciplined, that bravery isn't enough. 90 seconds of controlled fire from prepared positions achieves what hours of conventional combat might not achieve. The initiative belongs entirely to the ambushers, and they're using it ruthlessly. The rifleman's weapon grows hot in his hands from sustained firing. Brass casings pile up around his position, ejected shells gleaming in scattered light. He's burning through magazines, reloading with practiced speed, never taking his eyes from his sector. He sees targets everywhere, too many targets, so many that selecting priorities becomes the challenge. He engages threats first, anyone with a weapon oriented toward Australian positions. Then he engages anyone attempting to organize others. Then targets of opportunity. His shoulder aches from the weapon's recoil. His ears ring despite the adrenaline damping his awareness of the sound. But his hands stay steady. His breathing stays controlled. 3-round burst, new target, fire, new target, fire. 90 seconds feels like eternity when you're in it. Feels like hours compressed into impossibility. But it's actually just 90 seconds, a span of time that passes in normal life without notice, but here contains entire lifetimes of action and decision. The commander checks his watch, timing the ambush, knowing that staying too long means enemy reinforcements might arrive or organized response might develop. 90 seconds was planned. 90 seconds is what they execute. At the predetermined moment, his voice cuts through. Cease fire. Withdraw. The order is repeated by each man, passing confirmation. Fire stops instantly. That discipline showing again. They could keep shooting. There are still targets. But the mission is intelligence and survival, not body count. They've done what they came to do. The Australians withdraw using their pre-planned escape route, moving upslope through marked paths they memorized yesterday. Pre-positioned, discipline maintained, even in withdrawal. There's no running, no panic, no mad scramble, just controlled tactical movement executed at speed. They move in bounds, one pair covering while the other moves, then switching. The automatic rifleman goes last, remaining in position to cover the withdrawal until everyone else is clear, then following. They've rehearsed this. Muscle memory takes over. Behind them, the enemy is stunned, disorganized, still trying to understand what happened. Officers are shouting. Some soldiers return fire at where they think the Australians were, but the Australians are already 30 meters further up the ridgeline, moving through jungle they studied and marked and understood. No friendly casualties. 4 men against 500, perfect execution, clean withdrawal. The jungle swallows them. Within 2 minutes of ceasing fire, they're invisible again, moving fast but carefully, putting distance between themselves and the ambush site. Behind them, smoke drifts through shattered trees. The sounds of the enemy battalion fade, swallowed by terrain and vegetation. They move for an hour at speed, burning energy they've conserved for 6 days, knowing that distance now is more important than stealth. Only when they've created several kilometers of separation do they slow, do they stop to listen, to ensure no pursuit has organized behind them. A Viet Cong survivor at the ambush site catches movement up the ridgeline. Just a shadow. Just a flicker of something that wasn't there before. He raises his rifle, finger on trigger, training his weapon on the spot. His hands shake, his ears still ring from the blasts. He's not entirely sure he saw anything at all. The shape disappears. Or was never there. The jungle shows him nothing. He lowers his rifle, unsure, traumatized by violence that came from nowhere and vanished just as quickly. Above him, invisible in the green canopy, 4 Australians slip away like they were never there. 12 hours later, after moving through the day and into evening using their pre-planned extraction route, after linking up with a helicopter that drops into a brief clearing for exactly 90 seconds before lifting away again, the patrol returns to base. They unload packs in silence, the weight of 6 days literally lifting from shoulders, but the metaphorical weight settling deeper. They remove boots caked with 6 days of mud, peeling off socks that have merged with skin, revealing feet pale and wrinkled and raw from constant moisture. They sit in silence because there are no words adequate to the experience. Hands still shake slightly, adrenaline finally fading and leaving exhaustion in its wake. No celebrating, no bragging, no recounting the ambush in dramatic terms. Just decompression. The weight of what they did settling onto shoulders in a different way than rucksacks did. They clean weapons methodically, the familiar motions helping minds process, giving hands something to do while brains catch up to everything that happened. Field strip, wipe down, oil lightly, reassemble, check function. The ritual is comforting in its normalcy. This is what older veterans understand in their bones. What civilians can never fully grasp, no matter how well explained. The loneliness of small patrols. 4 men beyond any support, beyond any help, living or dying based entirely on their own skill and luck. The cost that comes not in wounds visible to doctors, but in exhaustion that settles into bones, emotional fatigue that takes weeks or months to fully process. The strange mix of pride and quiet sorrow, pride in executing a difficult mission flawlessly, sorrow at the necessity of violence, and the cost it extracts from everyone involved. They did their job. Not for medals, though medals might come. Not for recognition, though recognition might follow. For each other. Because that's what mateship means, when stripped of sentiment and reduced to survival. Because the man next to you is depending on you, and you're depending on him, and that mutual dependence creates bonds stronger than any other human relationship. Australians don't talk about this much. The culture doesn't encourage emotional expression or dramatic declaration, but it sits there between veterans, solid as the weapons they carried, a shared understanding that needs no words. The debrief happens the next day after they've slept and eaten and begun to return to something resembling normal. The intelligence officer asks questions. The patrol commander provides answers. Numbers, disposition, weapons, unit markings, timeline, the dry facts that turn observation into actionable intelligence. The debrief is professional, thorough, boring in the way that important things often are. The dramatic story becomes statistics and coordinates on a map. This intelligence will feed into planning for future operations, will help other patrols understand enemy patterns, will contribute to the larger picture of enemy capabilities and intentions. This is why they went out. Not for the ambush, though that became necessary. For this information, for these facts that seem so mundane when written in a report, but cost 6 days of fear and exhaustion to acquire. In the weeks that follow, intelligence reports filter back through various sources. Prisoner interrogations, radio intercepts, captured documents, agent reports from villages in the area. They all tell similar stories. Viet Cong commanders reference the Australians specifically in internal communications. They use terms that translate roughly as quiet moving, as ghosts, as soldiers who appear from nowhere. They issue warnings about small patrols operating in Phuoc Tu Province. They teach their units to listen for subtle signs, to trust instincts about being watched, to never assume security, even in areas they control. They develop counter-tactics, more aggressive patrolling, tighter security, better discipline. The Australians have earned a reputation built not on volume of fire or technological superiority, but on skill, on the ability to appear from nowhere and disappear just as quickly, on the willingness to operate in tiny patrols that most armies wouldn't risk, on bushcraft and patience and discipline. The respect is mutual. The Australians know the VC are skilled opponents. The VC know the Australians are dangerous in ways that require different responses than American operations demand. This legacy extends far beyond Vietnam, rippling forward through decades into modern warfare. Australian SAS tracking schools become training grounds where Allied forces learn these methods. Americans study the patrol tactics, the Claymore employment techniques, the patient stalking approach that achieves surprise through discipline rather than technology. British SAS compare notes on jungle craft, sharing lessons learned in different theaters but recognizing common principles. The doctrine born in these green mountains shapes modern special forces operations worldwide. Small patrols, deep penetration reconnaissance, patient observation over days or weeks, overwhelming violence at the chosen moment, then vanish before enemy can organize response. These principles are taught at Fort Bragg and Hereford and every special operations training facility around the world. The Australian contribution to special warfare doctrine is studied in staff colleges and war colleges. Academic papers analyze their methods. Training manuals incorporate their techniques. All of it traces back to missions like this one, to 4 men who spent 6 days demonstrating that skill and patience can overcome any numerical disadvantage. What made them different? The question is asked by historians and military analysts and other soldiers trying to understand how such small forces achieved such disproportionate effects. It starts with bushcraft, with understanding land and weather and how men move through wilderness. This isn't something you can teach in a classroom. It's generational knowledge, passed from father to son, from old digger to young soldier, from experience to student. Australians grow up in country that kills you if you don't understand it, in outback where water is survival and getting lost means death. That cultural foundation translates directly to military operations in places like Vietnam. Reading sign, understanding weather patterns, knowing how to move quietly. These aren't special skills to Australians. They're normal, expected, the baseline that everyone grows up with. Applied to military operations, they become extraordinary. It continues with mateship, that distinctly Australian concept that's more than friendship, more than camaraderie, something that exists in a category of its own. That bond deeper than words, that knowledge that your life sits in your mate's hands and his sits in yours. That mutual dependence creates behavior that looks superhuman from outside but feels normal from inside. You don't abandon your mate. You don't let him down. You don't fail him. These aren't rules. They're identity, who you are. The social pressure and cultural expectation combine to create soldiers who simply will not quit on each other, who will endure incredible hardship rather than be the weak link, who will take extra risks rather than let their mates down. This cultural trait becomes tactical advantage when applied to military operations requiring small teams operating independently. Discipline matters too. The ability to lie motionless while mosquitoes bite. The willingness to go hungry rather than make noise opening rations. The capacity to maintain absolute silence for hours or days when necessary. This isn't natural. Humans are social animals who like to talk and move and interact. Training soldiers to override these instincts requires cultural foundation that values restraint and control. Australian culture, with its emphasis on understatement and emotional control, provides exactly this foundation. The culture doesn't reward loud boasting or dramatic gestures. It rewards quiet competence and understated excellence. This cultural bias translates beautifully into military operations requiring patience and stealth. Understanding the land, not as obstacle, but as ally, reading its moods and rhythms and using them for advantage. Knowing when to move, because wind is covering sound. Knowing where to position because terrain channels enemy movement. Knowing how to use weather and vegetation and water features to enhance concealment. This environmental awareness is again cultural, coming from generations of living in country that requires you to understand it or it kills you. Applied to military operations, it gives Australians advantages that more technologically sophisticated forces sometimes lack. You can have all the equipment in the world, but if you don't understand how to use terrain effectively, you're at disadvantage against someone who does. Quiet confidence that needs no announcement. The knowledge that you're good at what you do without needing to tell everyone. The ability to let results speak rather than words. This cultural trait makes Australian soldiers frustrating to some allies who mistake quiet confidence for lack of aggression, who misread understatement as uncertainty. But it produces soldiers who are secure enough in their abilities that they don't need external validation, who can operate independently without constant reassurance, who trust themselves and their mates to get the job done regardless of circumstances. This psychological foundation is critical for the kind of operations that leave 4 men alone in enemy territory for 6 days with no support and no backup plan except their own skill. For the veterans who walked those patrols, who spent days in wet jungle knowing one mistake meant death, who carried the weight of decisions made in split seconds, who lived through the fear and exhaustion and came home to country that didn't always understand what they'd done. Your skills changed how wars were fought. The lessons you learned and the methods you refined echo through Special Forces training programs today. Young soldiers in a dozen armies learn tracking techniques you pioneered, study patrol formations you perfected, practice immediate action drills you developed. Your contributions to military doctrine are recognized by professionals worldwide, even when general public doesn't know your stories. Your stories matter. What you did in silence speaks louder than volumes written about conventional battles, louder than the big operations that got headlines, louder than the dramatic rescues that made movies. 4 men against a battalion. 6 days of patient stalking. 90 seconds of perfect violence. No casualties. Clean withdrawal. This is Australian excellence, stripped to its core. The absolute embodiment of everything that makes Australian soldiers distinctive and effective. No theatrics, no bravado. Just professionals doing what they trained for, doing it better than anyone expected, doing it in conditions that would break most people, and walking away to do it again because that's what the job required. The weight you carried wasn't just rucksacks and ammunition. It was responsibility for each other's lives. It was the knowledge that your country asked you to do impossible things and you did them. It was the cost of seeing and doing things that mark you forever. That weight doesn't disappear when you come home. It changes shape, but remains. The recognition that comes years later, the understanding that your service mattered and your skills were exceptional, doesn't eliminate that weight, but maybe makes it easier to carry. Maybe helps you understand that what you did was remarkable, even if it felt normal at the time. In a war of noise, of helicopter gunships and artillery barrages, of loud American operations and dramatic sweeps, of technology and firepower and overwhelming force, 4 Australians showed the world the power of silence, showed that skill can overcome numbers, showed that patience is a weapon, showed that understanding your enemy and choosing when to fight matters more than how much firepower you bring, showed that small teams of exceptional soldiers can achieve effects far beyond their numbers, showed that mateship and discipline and bushcraft combined into something greater than the sum of their parts. The lesson resonated then and resonates now. In modern special operations, in current doctrine, in the way elite forces train and operate worldwide, the Australian influence is clear. The quiet professionals who went into green mountains and came back with intelligence and victory, who made it look easy when it was anything but, who never bragged because that's not what Australians do. Their legacy lives in every small patrol that slips into enemy territory, trusting skill over support, lives in every perfectly executed ambush, lives in every soldier who understands that sometimes the best weapon is the ability to wait.